We are back with you. We were just talking about how the PTSD, or the post-traumatic stress disorder, affects soldiers on the battlefield after they return and when they are hired in the police forces across the country. The reason I went there was because I wanted to tie it down to the leadership. Is that, yes, when you are, say, in the army as a veteran afterwards, you get treated for that. But the political leadership of a country that may also be affected by a kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, by a kind of PTSD, they don't get treated for several reasons. One, that they may not be subjected to some kind of a test and analysis to find out if they have been affected. I doubt it if these leaders who just sign their names on a piece of paper, knowing that that signature implied that tens or hundreds or thousands of people across the globe would get killed in the name of being the enemies or a threat to the United States security or whatever, is that those people that were killed were human souls. That will haunt them, that they didn't have their day in court, or that the United States had no jurisdiction of killing the citizens of another country in their own country. And the latest is that the United States has the power and authority, that is legal, political, to make it quote-unquote legal and lawful, to kill any person that opposes American interests in any part of the world without revealing that person's identity or giving that person a chance to question the claim against him or her. And so therefore we in essence have become a rogue empire. A rogue state is bad, and a rogue empire is even worse. And in these days that we are coming upon the 71st anniversary, if we can call it that, of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and what we did to the tens of thousands of people in Japan, because we wanted to test the two types of bombs we had developed, that we wanted to make sure that in spite of the fact that the Japanese government was willing to surrender and submit and make peace, we didn't want them to surrender, because we hadn't had the chance to test our nuclear weapons. So we are coming upon an anniversary of unleashing of the nuclear power on the human race. And that threat is always there. That politically we might be more accepting the term that yes, there is a threat, a terrorist threat, a threat to the U.S. interest, a threat to the U.S. Security, etc., etc. And this is all centered or on one's identity as an American, interest to American interests. And who is the American? The average American is not threatened. It's the interest of the big corporations. But again, the price will be paid by the average citizen. But the point I'm making here is that this threat is magnified so that it can justify action against certain people around the world. Whereas in the process, the biggest threat to humanity and to the animal kingdom on this earth is the threat of the nuclear power that we have that could be unleashed deliberately or by mistake. Imagine the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were much, much smaller than the ones we have now. The effect of any nuclear explosion, again, accidental or deliberate or otherwise, will be so devastating to the human race, to the world community, to our humanity, that an attack on the train in Brussels or somewhere in Europe doesn't compare. Those attacks that happen in, like the recent one in Kuwait and Pakistan, or in the Muslim East, they don't even appear on people's radars. We pay attention only to such acts when they occur in the West, implying basically that it's okay for the Middle Easterners to die. Like 73 people died in Kuwait yesterday. Most of them lawyers, intellectuals, intelligent, educated people. So the treasure and wealth of a society is being targeted in a way. Similar attacks occurred in Kabul, several of them in the last 2-3 weeks. And their occurrence in Syria and Iraq or in Libya, that's the norm, unfortunately. But regardless of that, the point is that the real threat is not being answered. The non-nuclear proliferation treaties are not signed by certain other rogue states, such as Israel, who does not even acknowledge whether it has it or it doesn't. But it's estimated that they have more than 250 nuclear warheads. Pakistan, India, those two countries in one of the most densely populated part of the world. Again, there is a possibility that an accident could occur there. and it's difficult even to imagine the casualties if they occur in the Indian subcontinent because of the population density and because of the weather patterns, like the Himalayas in the north, that can hold the whole flow of radiation there for much longer, that would become even more harmful. But even, well, let's forget about the details. The point is that nobody's talking about that threat. The only thing they are talking about, those who have the power, is to negotiate treaties where they can limit the number of warheads. There is nothing more ridiculous than that. Because whether you have 4,000 warheads on each side, or 2,000 or 1,000, it doesn't matter. All it takes is only one. So the argument that should be made should be the elimination, not the limitation. The elimination of nuclear weapons from the world. Not when Iran is targeted because we didn't want them to have one, because they are people with the wrong belief system, but it's okay for us to have them. But the actual argument should be made that it is not okay for anyone to have them. So if there is a treaty, it should be one where the elimination, the total elimination of all nuclear weapons, warheads, rockets that could carry them, and every other accessory weapon system that is developed for the delivery of these, that they should all be eliminated by a mutual global agreement, not limitations, but complete elimination. But obviously, those are not the priorities of those who are in power, because they are thinking in terms of the balance of power, not the human race. So the argument, to go back after this little excursion, was that the PTSD affects the soldier in the battlefield. It then eventually affects the police officer on the street, but it certainly also affects leaders in the as heads of governments, and they are not immune to this. They are also humans. They have, conscience, and they might appear to be sleeping comfortably at night, but those who have conscience, I doubt it that they do. And so in that case, this condition of PTSD goes up all the way to the leadership of some of these countries. And as we saw in World War II, you could have all sorts of people in charge of the political, or rather military machine of countries that can devastate humanity. But because the national image of a particular state is at stake, usually these conditions are not revealed. I'm sure that if George Bush would have been psychoanalyzed, that the symptoms would have been very much present in him when he was the commander-in-chief. So because we shield our leaders, because we want to keep that particular national image of responsibility, authority, leadership, and therefore their condition remain mistreated. And of course the system works through a PR, manufacturing consent, to use Chomsky's words, in order to protect them and shield them from any scrutiny. They are easy to pinpoint to the pathological behavior of leaders around the world. And yes, a few have been named, and I'm not going to go there. But I'm sure that it also affects the leadership here in America as well. So in a sense, when we are trying to make a distinction between why humans tend to idealize peace and resort to war, one of the enabling elements is militarism. As the military and political apparatus collaborate to stay in power, one become an extension of the other, and then this is joined by the war profiteers who want to maintain and sustain authoritative figureheads because war brings them profit. To them, it's the bottom line that matters. So in a sense, it takes us back to the warning of Dwight Eisenhower, the President of the United States, back in the 50s. Before he was leaving office, he warned us about the industrial military complex, a term that also at the time included the congressional industrial military complex, but according to a suggestion by one of his advisors, the congressional element was excluded from that equation. But nonetheless, it's very heavily involved, and it's that industrial military congressional complex that is undermining democracies and advanced societies. That if we are dividing the world into the first world and the third world, never mind the second one, that in the third world, democracies are undermined by dictators that are often protected by governments of the first world. And then in the first world, democracies are undermined because those who are put in power by the war machine, which is the war profiteers, the militarists, and the congressional element in it, which in a way not only gets to power, to the center of power, but can remain in power and can even retire from the US Congress, for instance, and get heavily involved as lobbyists by the militarist or by the war profiteers or by the military industry, by the weapons manufacturers, and therefore it becomes a revolving door that certain elements who becomes components of this war machine at the higher level of our government, whether within the official bureaucracy or outside of it, have kept the United States on a keel to be basically a war profiteering system that while in terms of our social security, our education, health, and welfare, we have people who are, I heard recently from a visitor from abroad who said, I couldn't believe seeing people sleeping on sidewalks in America. That's shocking to them, but apparently not to us. And so you would say that how much would it take for us to feed all the hungry in America, to house all the homeless who sleep on the sidewalks, and to close them? compare that cost to a percentage of the military budget that we have for the Pentagon that is generally not disclosed. So we are not serving our own people either in that sense. And that's why when I say it devastates democracy, it undermines our own democracy, it does it because of that. Because the governments prioritize things based on what the corporate greed demands, what the lobbyists dictate, and what the congressional individuals in the Congress decide to be a policy for the country. So therefore, militarism is not only devastating the world outside, but it's in essence devastating our society right here, not leaving so many hungry and homeless and unsheltered and unclothed on our streets, but on top of it, it militarizes the police that harm them even more. And so therefore this becomes an addictive fever. And in this addiction, dictators, in a way, that operate within the hubris syndrome becomes the enablers of dictators abroad, and therefore the whole concept of governance at the global level becomes nothing but a mechanism for suppressing the masses across the globe, which is a shame, because in the 21st century we have the social media and all the media of communication and the means of education and meaningful exchange of ideas and thoughts. And still, we seem to be unable to solve very, very simple problems. They're as pessimistic as this may sound, one should not forget that at times there have been leaders who have made paradigmatic shifts in their policies, either individually initiated or through some kind of a movement that we have cases of hawks turned dove statesmen such as Mikhail Gorbachev of the former Soviet Union, or Yitzhak Rabin of Israel, or to some extent Shimon Peres. So there have been, or Deng Xiaoping of China. So those are unfortunately anomalies at this stage, and let's hope they become more common when they realize that they're steering the ship in the wrong direction, and the ship of their nation state, that they see the iceberg ahead and steer away in time to avoid great disasters, and in a way that could impact the world peace tremendously, because these may have been transformations of sorts within their personal life, but then they can project that transformation and give the world a message that yes, there are peaceful alternatives, and it may require some undoing of the damage that they have caused or their systems have caused, but it's okay to resort to that so that they can prevent an avalanche of hatred and warmongering, which in a sense is right now sweeping across America in this election cycle, where it's not the very obvious of the character and personality instability of one of our presidential candidates, but that the millions who follow him and vote for him, that is the danger. And that's the danger I refer to, the avalanche of hatred, that an avalanche is triggered by a very small event, as small as even the echo of a sound or the flight of a bird, that when there is enough snow that has piled up along some huge ledge of or a cliff in a mountain, that it could take, like I said, even the flight of a bird to trigger it. Whereas in the American political scene, of course, it's more than a bird. We have seen since Donald Trump's entering the race for the White House, the hatred groups have increased, not only in their rallies that people are attacked, but hate crime against Muslims, against Jews, against other minorities. And the concept of racism has gained a kind of legitimacy in the mind of the less educated, let's put it politely. And you would say that all the progress that we have made since the end of slavery, official ending of slavery, and since the Civil War, or the civil rights movement of the 60s, and subsequently, that it seemed like a whole lot of that had been, if not completely reversed, very severely damaged. So let's have a moment of contemplation, of going deep within ourselves to find out where are we headed as Americans. Not that I'm endorsing one or the other side, and I'm sure I know for certain that there are more than two sides in this race. That's not the point. The point is that regardless of who gets formally the levers of power, sits at the helm of the American polity, of the political system, where will we be a year from now, or a few years down the line? How responsible are we acting in this juncture of history? And are we contributing to the main argument we are making is the hubris syndrome? And I think some of the political leaders, or rather politicians that are running for the office, probably have already developed the hubris syndrome, that they don't even need to be in the office for 6 years to make decisions that will affect humanity so drastically. And by humanity, I mean that the United States, being a superpower, in a sense, we are electing political leaders that, in essence, affect global politics, not just American politics. So the hubris syndrome discussion, of course, will continue, and we'll take a break here, and we'll be back with you after this.